Barry Eisler. He's written the book Inside Out, and he's in the studio. Barry, welcome.
Good to be here, Cenk. Thank you.
All right. Very glad to have you here. Now, you've written 8 books. They're all thrillers. This is the second one that's like more deeply political about the stuff that's going on. I want to talk to you about that in a second. But you were actually you have a little bit of expertise in this because you were at a covert position in the CIA Directorate of Operations for 3 years, which sounds really badass. Was it as badass as it sounds, or no?
I think it probably sounds more badass than it really is. I sometimes tell people, if you really want to understand the CIA, you should picture the post office, but with spies.
Wait, I'm very curious about that. First of all, let's just get it clear on the record. Did you ever order the assassination of anyone?
Many times, but nobody listened to me.
You just couldn't get them to pull
Every time I hear someone talking on a cell phone in an elevator, I order an assassination. It never gets done.
It never gets done. All right. So, but that is very... What I'm curious about is the CIA, what are they doing, right? Like, because you see the movies, and in the movies, you know, they're unbelievable, and just before the bomb goes off, they da-da-da, and they got all these forces, et cetera. Right. And then sometimes you'll see in the press that they are like, no, we didn't want to lose anybody, so we didn't really bother going after bin Laden.
Right.
And I'm like, wait a minute, which one is it?
Yeah.
You know, so having been there a little bit...
A little closer to door number 2, I would say. People forget. It's funny that Americans have a fairly negative view of government services in a lot of areas. You go to the post office or the DMV, the line will be really long, you'll get frustrated, you think that government's inefficient. But then they think the CIA is somehow magically immune from the rules of bureaucratic inefficiency. It's not. It's a very big bureaucracy with terrible inefficiencies. And for anyone who's listening who wants to know more about this, highly, highly recommend a book called Legacy of Ashes by Tim Weiner. Legacy of Ashes, The History of the CIA. It's a very sad history of corruption and incompetence, and it's really the way things are there.
And I bet what really winds up hurting is that they keep so many things secret by the nature of what it is.
Absolutely.
And the more or the less transparency you have in anything, the more corruption you'll have, the more bureaucracy you'll have, the more ineffective it'll be.
Basic laws of physics, and it's not just the CIA, it's the whole government. The more secrecy, the less accountability. The more accountability, the more mistakes will go unredressed, and the worse performance will become.
So before we get to the book, I have one more question on the CIA. How does it work? Did they tap you on the shoulder? Did you were you in Skull and Bones, or seriously, how did they select?
You know, it's probably a little different for everyone, but when I first applied to the CIA, it was 1980. I think about 1988, I was in law school, and there was no internet, so I just went to the Cornell Career Center and picked up a brochure. I think it was right next to General Electric and whoever else. Made a phone call, one thing led to another, a whole bunch of tests, background tests, polygraph. But maybe for other people, they were actually selected, I don't know. I approached them.
Okay, and then when you go, do they swear to you to a life of secrecy? If not, you know, the sniper team show up, or how does that work? Or
yeah, I think that's probably also something in the movie. Some people suggest that, you know, once you're in, you can never leave, to which I say, yeah, you know, they've got this guy in the basement at Langley who's churning out these novels that my name gets stamped on. It's all part of my cover. But now, if you want to leave, you can leave. Why would they want you to hang around if you don't want to be there anymore?
All right, fair enough. Okay, now that you've destroyed the mystique of the CIA, thanks a lot.
Such as it is.
Okay, so now let's go to the fictional book you've written. But there is real intrigue in the real world, you know. So the CIA has the downside that you explained, but it has another downside, which is that they really started to do some things, but it wasn't very positive what they did.
Yeah.
So tell us about the real world first before we get to how you covered it in the book.
Right.
What triggered this book for you in the real world?
Well, I was just starting to get an idea for a new book, and I had some general notions. And this is December 2007. I read a Mark Mazzetti piece in the New York Times where he reported that the CIA had made but destroyed, they were a little vague, 2 or 3 interrogation videos depicting waterboarding, among other torture practices. And at the time I thought, 2 or 3, that just doesn't sound right. I mean, what are these, home videos or something like that? There must have been more. Little did I know, 15 months later, Mazzetti writes another piece. No, it wasn't 2 tapes, it was 92, but they were destroyed. So I started thinking, something really weird is going on here. I mean, why did the CIA make these tapes? Why did they destroy them? Why did they report making and destroying them? Why did they change the number? I mean, those things we know happened, but what caused those events? This book became possibly fictional explanation for what was reported in the news.
What do you think really happened?
It's right in this book. I don't think the tapes were destroyed. I think they were missing. And
so do you think they're still around?
I don't think they'll ever be found.
Why not destroy them? I mean, because if they're never going to be found,
Yeah.
Why not go all the way?
They could have been destroyed. And if they were destroyed, the thinking went like this: we're going to take huge heat for destroying these tapes. And they might. John Durham, it's going on for a while, but he's supposed to be finishing up his investigation of what happened to these tapes. Somebody might take the heat. It might be a scapegoat. I don't know. But the thinking was, no matter how much heat we take for the cover-up, in this case, the crime is actually worse than the cover-up.
Right. I had a debate with conservatives a couple of years back on this, and they say, how dare you, unpatriotic scum? Obviously, if the CIA tells you they lost the tapes, they lost the tapes.
Right.
Having worked at the CIA, having covered this for a while, is that the most comical thing you've ever heard?
Yes. But not just because I worked at the CIA, because, again, it's a sort of violation of everything we know about human nature. Again, if we don't have checks and balances, if we don't have accountability, people will start acting in their own interest. Originally, we'll have secrecy to protect programs that really do need to be secret for whatever tactical or strategic reasons. But we know that when secrecy becomes unchecked, when the government can impose it at will, it's used to cover up government malfeasance and incompetence. There's so much evidence of this that anyone who denies that the government will use secrecy to cover up its own malfeasance is just, you're not living in the real world. It's hard to have a discussion with someone like that.
As soon as the tapes went missing, I thought, my God, what must have been on those tapes?
Exactly. You know what was on them. And it was so bad that they decided we'll take the heat for the cover-up, and instead of Abu Ghraib style, letting actual video, not just photographs, but video with sound, get out.
So you've got some theories on how that plays out in the form of a thriller in Inside Out. So those are the tapes that got those guys in trouble. But I wanted to ask you one more thing about the tapes. Why leak it to the press? That's weird that they destroyed them.
Yeah. So I gave that a lot of thought because, again, we know these things happen, but why? And I think the answer is like this. When the government knows that something's going to come out anyway, what it will sometimes do is try to introduce the most favorable or least unfavorable fact pattern it can to illustrate a principle. So, for example, tapes are missing, it's going to come out. Somehow we have to get ahead of the story because at some point, at the time, the ACLU had a Freedom of Information Act pending. It's a long story, but there was a request in court, and the CIA knew, wow, they're going to ask for these tapes. We can't produce them. We have to destroy them. So what do? Introduce a low number. Make it sound like it's not that bad. 2 tapes, maybe 3, and make sure that we say that these are images of only the worst of the worst, like Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, so the poster boy for terrorism. No one can get too upset if we waterboarded Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. Similarly, right now, this assassination program, who's the person that the government has used to articulate the principle that President Obama has the right to assassinate American citizens? This guy, Anwar al-Awlaki, he looks like a terrorist. He looks like he's at a central casting. He's got a funny name. He's got a beard. They're not going to do that against, Mike Malone or something like that. I mean, it's too all-American a name. It's going to be someone who, that's not me, that's the other, it's some brown-skinned guy. And then once you have the principle in place, then you can start fleshing it out. So they start with 2 tapes, and later they walk the number up to 92 once the public's okay with the principle that some tapes were made and destroyed.
See, what Barry's referring to is critical. I need you to understand that, okay? So this, when the first story broke on the missing tapes, it was not a journalist doing a great job, and uncovering a story. It was a coordinated leak to that journalist. And if you ask me, he did a terrible job because he just took it and put it in the press as if it was true.
That's right.
Right? But anybody who's been working this for any stretch of time knows if they told you 2 tapes, there's 92 tapes.
That's right.
It might not be 92, but it might be 12, it might be 22. If they told you it's only Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, it's much more likely to be much broader than that. Yeah. If you print that, well, you're not a reporter, you're just a stenographer.
Exactly. And mainstream media is just is so corrupted with this kind of so-called journalism. An anonymous source calls up a pet reporter and leaks government talking points. This is part of what the book is about. In fact, I borrowed a term that I love from Bart Gellman, who was with the Post, Washington Post, now with Newsweek, wrote a great book called Angler, the biography of Dick Cheney. Calls it information laundering. You're the government, you've got a set of talking points. You can't just issue a press release because people will rightly recognize, oh, these are government talking points. So you call up your favorite reporter, tell the reporter this stuff on background. And then the reporter, just as a stenographer, writes up your talking points. But then people read that and they think, oh, well, this is reported in the New York Times or the Washington Post. It's news. It's not. It's government propaganda. It's talking points being laundered the way drug dollars are laundered.
That's a great way of putting it. And sometimes I worry that, we're worse off in some ways than the old Soviet Union. Because at least people knew not to believe that news. Yeah, I mean, it was obvious. Everybody knew that that was a joke, right?
It's a real problem.
Right. Here we have the illusion of real news, but none of the substance.
That's right.
So, except for Michael Hastings, and that's why the mainstream press is in a rage over it.
Exactly right.
How did you screwed up the whole thing by doing extra
this
reporting?
cozy relationship? Yeah.
Right. So we're talking to Barry Eisler. He wrote the book Inside Out, and it's an interesting novel as to how, what might have gone on in the background with the tapes, et cetera. It's a thriller, and it's actually just coming out now. And there's a book tour coming out that you're going to be that I want to talk to you about in just a second. But I want to ask you about the right-wing versions of these books. Right? You call them conservative porn. What does that mean?
Well, I'm actually borrowing that term from Glenn Beck. He used it approvingly. So he was referring to a novel by Vince Flynn, who's got an action hero named Mitch Rapp, who typically tortures to save the day, a kind of Jack Bauer character. And there's a scene in one of Vince's books where Jack Bauer explains to Congress that you don't know what's going on, and this is what it takes to get the job done, blah, blah, blah. And Glenn Beck said, wow, it's almost conservative porn. It is. It's a good word for it, actually. So the right has been really effective in cross-promoting its ideology through fiction. Torture. Take torture. They reduce torture to a single talking point, which is something along the lines of, can you really say that torture never, ever works? And then they answer it with Jack Bauer. Hey, Jack Bauer saves the day. Torture works. And then Glenn Beck brings pro-torture thriller writers like Vince Flynn, Brad Thor on his show, and Rush Limbaugh and Sean Hannity do the same. And it's tactically, my hat is off to them. It's a beautiful operation. Progressives need to do something in response.
It's so wonderfully ironic because then they will turn around and say, you see these Hollywood liberals trying to brainwash you.
I know.
Right? When in fact they love it when they got their own guys who are trying to brainwash you. And of course, Beck is the one that slips up and tells you what the reality is because he doesn't have enough savvy that Rush Limbaugh has to pretend that it's all real and calls it conservative porn, which it is. So now, before we tell everybody about the book tour, I want to go back to Covert for a second.
Yeah.
That you were in covert position at the CIA. So does that mean you had a front job and that you couldn't tell anybody about it?
Well, generally speaking, yes. I had official cover. So my cover was that I was in the State Department Foreign Service. There's also something called, loosely speaking, deep cover, non-official cover, NOCs. These are people who have no official affiliation. They're run almost like spies are run. They meet with their case officers in safe houses, that kind of thing. But that wasn't me. I had official cover. It's just another part of the government, not the CIA. And as far as secrecy goes, yeah, if you have a cover position at the CIA, it's not that you can't tell anyone. It's a little bit of a myth that if you think about it. So when I got there, they said, look, it's up to you who you tell within reason. You might want to tell your wife. We recommend that you do, your spouse, because if you don't, then your spouse can become a hindrance to you living your cover, whereas if your spouse knows, then he or she can become an asset. So it's not that you don't tell anybody. I mean, my wife knew what I did, but you certainly,
But you don't go around the grocery store like, hey, I'm CIA, everybody, watch out. Step aside, CIA. Okay. Covert operation, step aside.
It would be nice if it worked that way.
Right. So State Department, Foreign Service. From now on, when I meet someone from there, I'm assuming CIA.
Yeah, and people do that, and so a certain percentage of the time you'll be right.
Okay, that flat out.
Yeah, it's just the way it is.
It is the way it is. And Valerie Plame was deep undercover, right?
I never have been entirely clear about the nature of Valerie Plame's cover position, so I don't really know. I read a lot of articles about it, and I could never figure out quite, was she a NOC? Did she have official cover? Was there some sort of transition at some point? It seems a little murky to me.
Did you guys ever hang back in the day?
No, I never heard of her until Cheney and company outed her.
The covert operations drinks must be awesome. Going to a bar with the covert guys. But except it's not. It's like going to the drinks with a postal office. You were saying. But anyway, I can imagine it through books like Inside Out, at least.
That's the way to do it.
Right, the fantasy world. All right, now the book tour starts right here in L.A. Actually, it starts right now. Right after this, you're going to the Saban Theater, which is down the street in Wilshire.
That's right.
If you're in L.A., 8440 Wilshire Boulevard. That used to be known as the Wilshire Theater, Beverly Hills. Oh, you're talking to Jason Leopold from Truth Out?
That's right.
He's there too?
He'll be, it's a discussion, that's the format. And $5 for, and I will donate $5 for every copy of Inside Out that we sell at the event. So far we've got over 100 people signed up. So it should be a good fundraiser for independent media.
So when does that start?
7:30 tonight.
So 7:30 Pacific time tonight. And then you're doing one more out here tomorrow at 7:30 p.m. Pacific. Where?
No. This is the LA event tonight with Truth Out, right? At
Right.
the
Oh, then you go to Menlo Park.
Exactly.
Oh, okay, I got you. And so, and you have a website for people to check it out?
BarryEisler.com, and all the information's on the website.
And the book is called Inside Out. Barry, thanks so much for coming in.
Thank you,
really
Cenk.
appreciate it.
Likewise, thank you.